Over the past few years, a bunch of articles have been written about how kids all just want to become TikTokers now, and the general reaction is to get quite emotional and just blame the kids and say, these kids are lazy, they want lazy jobs, and when I was younger, I wanted to be so ambitious, unlike these kids. And I think that just doesn't paint the picture. I think that's completely dishonest with what's actually happening, and let me explain. I'm first going to break down the underlying psychology that prompts children to feel this way, then I'm going to talk about the problem, and then we're going to talk about the solution. Firstly, I don't agree with the notion that every kid wants to become a TikToker. I think it's definitely a bit overstated. Pushing yourself online for views is widely seen as embarrassing for people of all ages, and that doesn't really change ever, unless you are able to situate yourself within an environment for which the pursuit can be nobly articulated. For example, you tell others that you are doing this solely for monetary reasons, or alternatively, that you are spreading some sort of meaningful message that you deeply care about, or on the off chance you have some sort of pristine artistic ability, those around you may actually applaud you for your efforts in pursuing online stardom, as potentially you ought to receive the recognition your peers believe you deserve. But if you can't frame your reasoning within those definitions, it sort of just comes off as an empty appeal for validation from people who don't really care about you. Nonetheless, even if children don't wish to actively become influencers, many quietly wish they had the status because of the social freedom that follows. In a world becoming overly saturated with content, who cares how your friend from school whom you see for a few hours every week feels, when you can constantly get the stimulation of a relationship by keeping up with your favorite daily live streamer? We have situated ourselves within an ecosystem where if you are not constantly doing something to climb some sort of incentive ladder or as some means to an end, that you are seen to not be taking yourself seriously. To this extent, I propose my solution to the initial question of what underlies the subtle shift in our young ones' career aspirations towards this field. Why TikTok and not doctor? I genuinely believe that the answer to this is that there lies the existence of a dynamic market. Now, before you call me out for over-intellectualizing this problem, or just my overtly pretentious use of the words dynamic and market, please just hear me out. Okay, to begin, when I say dynamic market, I am just referring to an ecosystem that is constantly changing due to inputs from those who interact with and within it. A super responsive web of possibilities that is always changing due to the behavior of those who participate. It's really just as simple as that. From birth, children yearn to participate in dynamic markets where there is a somewhat clear and sensible path forwards. Playing games as a kid is fun because you understand the objective and the path towards improvement is visible. What it takes to be better, even if it's extremely difficult, is moderately understood amongst all participants. Not only are the rules recognized, but there comes a feeling of satisfaction with the road to mastery. It feels good to get better at something that can be used in some way. As cringe as this may sound, it feels good to be productive in any market. Children don't just want to participate in some sort of linear game. They want their own personality and essence to help them win. The desired destination is a personalized outcome that correlates with a combination of their effort plus who they truly are. They want to play basketball not only to win, but to become the player that exudes their natural being. A kid who enjoys chemistry does not want to become the best at taking the class of chemistry, but rather a scientist pushing forth the limits of existence. They want the reward system to be fairly global, where the best actors are incentivized in some linear or exponential personalized fashion. Now that we know what children want, we can now question why they have gone to TikTok for career success and not through traditional methods of education. Many people will just be quick to blame the kids, saying that they just don't like school anymore, but I don't think this is being honest. Before we go into how the education system fosters this divergent path, let me first respond to a common criticism of the critique of the average school. The response to a critique is often something like this. Those who did not get the best benefits out of school were just destined to fail and lazy because, well, this person achieved this from that and so on and so forth. Besides the fact that I don't agree with the framework that environmental factors have little to do with outcomes and that it's all solely genetic, I think this criticism is quite unempathetic. Those who find success can often develop a form of tunnel vision that likely contributes to their achievements. However, this focused mindset might also discourage them from empathizing with those who have taken different routes. It's possible that some successful individuals, while reflecting on their own unique professional challenges, may feel a need to validate their sacrifices. This could lead them to undervalue the paths of others as they cling on to their own sense of identity. Believing the system can't improve is an overtly pessimistic worldview, often because people tightly link the reactionary aspects of their past to a causal, almost religious blueprint of their life in efforts to ground themselves. I am aware that there are many who have excelled in education and go on to work in their dream professions, but that's not even close to being the norm. Even of those who did excel in school, many fail to find any meaning or enjoyment in their professional lives. With that being said, one thing I believe everyone can agree on is that most people are way more competent and capable than they realize and are made to feel, and thus helping people achieve the best versions of themselves would be good for society. When anyone experiences a sense of productivity in a meaningful endeavor, coupled with a strong sense of self-agency, they generally become less neurotic and more positive humans. They become kinder, more empathetic, more forgiving, better parents, better neighbors, and overall just better citizens. And so I don't mean to bash education as an idea, but rather suggest it be more productive in unclogging the floodgates for those among us who are most energized to change the world, being the children, of course. When it comes to other people who have called out the education system before, the most notable figure, I think, in recent history is Peter Thiel. He came out with the Thiel Fellowship 15 years ago, which is a program that grants ambitious college students $100,000 to drop out and work on esoteric startups. He was heavily attacked at the time for seemingly encouraging students to leave the track that is education for a path with way more risk. At the same time of when he created the fellowship, Peter also went on a media run criticizing the point of going to university. The critics said that no one who took this fellowship was going to succeed and it was just going to be embarrassing 10 years later, but now here we are. Peter has been vindicated as some of the fellows have gone on to truly change their industries. Despite the program's success and the widespread adoption of Peter's ideas surrounding education, one observation I now have in retrospect is that you can't really tell children what outcome to reach for without fostering an environment for which that outcome is relatively likely. Humans are such circumstantial creatures, and you have to believe that people are, in one way or another, choosing actions which they believe to be in their best interest. So if not enough kids grow up to create ambitious hardware startups to boost the utility of our physical world, it has to be because it's not likely for the incentivized decision trees of their lives to end up at that point. My point being is that most of the Thiel Fellowship members have lives of continuously pursuing extraordinary outcomes since youth. And even without the fellowship, most of those students would probably be still very ambitious and pursue very extraordinary outcomes. And that without a college education, we have to face the facts that the most probable and now safest industry to pursue is social media, whether it be through individual stardom or collecting margins through marketing. Thus, if aiding our physical world is the outcome we wish for most of our youth to pursue, we have to be realistic in understanding that college is still, in most scenarios, the best pathway forward for most students. Now to the problems of the education system, and back to why kids want to be TikTokers. If children want to participate in dynamic markets with visible incentives and tangible rewards, how is school helping or preventing this cause? Well, to start, you don't really see most adults using an Erlenmeyer flask too often. The game of maintaining a professional career as an adult can be confusing and does not always seem to benefit goodwill as often as it's advertised to children to do so. Most parents are unable to help their children with their 8th grade geometry homework, so what gives a child the incentive to grind it out? The kid must believe that learning these skills is a means to an end. But if being an adult with a job is the end, and they don't use the majority of what is learned after 7th grade, then why struggle with the seemingly arbitrary means? The current structure of education demonstrates a very visible and commonly noted disconnect. Children are pressured to perform well on tests for what they are told to be their own benefit, but in truth, the school admin boards are using these 15-year-olds to produce statistics to use as leverage to acquire more funding. And when these students turn 18, many of them are way too burnt out from taking tests in which the results mattered way more than the process of learning, and after that, a large portion of them are now in college on stimulants to memorize flashcards to know something they never need to recall again. And so the problem can be condensed to this. The point of school with rapid technological change is just too arbitrary. The school admin boards have their goals set in mind when it comes to performing well on standardized tests, but beyond that, what portion of their students will go on to work in industries and jobs of which they are passionate about? The point of school is often stated as just a general education, but in reality and throughout history, school has always been a way more utilitarian institution than it is led on to be. The point of school is to prepare people to be good adults and so that we can have a good society. So if people are working less and less meaningful jobs, being prescribed more stimulants, are more depressed than ever, then we can probably conclude that school is just not well aligned with what society needs right now. Which leads right back to our initial question as to why the children yearn for TikTok. Well, it's because it's a dynamic market. If you make videos people want to see, people will inevitably watch them. It's as simple as that. It's not that children only want to be TikTokers, it's that all other professions are too often covered in murky incentive structures. It is not clear to a middle-class 12-year-old what next steps they ought to take to become a well-adjusted adult with an interesting and inspiring corporate job. The solution which I believe makes the most sense is to massively realign education to what we really value. As a kid, if you're interested in creating rockets, schools should be able to draw out what that path looks like. If you give a child a clear path with tangible incentives, they'll sprint forward, because becoming good at something is fun. I'm definitely not advocating for kids to be taught dropshipping at 14, but I think you should be able to be way more economically productive right now with just a high school diploma than the current status quo. The incentive structure must be organized so that when a person is in the most energized period of their life, they are then able to act on it and not forced into playing a wasteful status game for college admissions. Whenever this criticism is made, there is this initial neurotic response from people to blindly defend school, even when criticizing the idea of being educated was never made. Just that the way we currently do so is extremely wasteful, and at times done so poorly that the demoralizing results can even be counterproductive. My guess is that there's a deep-seated feeling of envy from those with the trauma of going through public school, that maybe anyone could go without it and become a well-adjusted and even productive human. It scares people when they begin to feel as if their suffering was not all that necessary. Cutting out the small percentage of the population that went to competitive and competent high schools who have ended up in high-paying tech roles, most white-collar jobs are extremely demoralizing and also could be taught to almost anyone within a few months of training, which is something that is really disheartening for most people to believe. Because if what you do isn't that special, then where do you find your worth? For a lot of kids, they can already see the writing on the wall, and that's why they wish to eject from traditional pathways. But for adults, most of them are in too deep to question anything, and thus to begin to question anything of these sorts is a bit depressing, so they just become bitter. How do we fix this problem? Because I think we all know that more TikTokers won't really make our individual lives better, not to downplay the democratization of media and the influence that comes with a more dynamic entertainment industry, but surely there exists a future where kids want to grow up and impact the world in a positive way, more so physically than just scraping ad rev from the digital world. To that, I'd suggest rebuilding our institutions based off first principle thinking and zero-cost budgeting, which just means we need to remove the cobwebs from these institutions and make sure that every decision within them is being made to fulfill their greater purpose, and that every dollar is being used as efficiently as possible. Obviously, with public organizations, they are more prone to waste because they lack the pressures of a constant, cost-regulating, efficient, dynamic market, and thus these institutions need to be scrutinized and questioned way more than they're currently being. Within the private markets, we need to unclog the decades of regulatory capture that has made our most ambitious industries stagnant and doomed exploratory hardware to the shackles of academia. We need to step away from the partisanship of economic and political ideologues and embrace the physical truth of dynamic markets. And yeah, this video is basically just my long-winded response to people complaining about children for having bad dreams and ambitions that they don't like. And yeah, it's the fault of you guys. No, I'm joking. I don't know.